Members of the Council, before I take the apologies for absence, I have been approached by Councillor Tony Newman, the Leader of the Council, supported by Councillor Tim Pollard, the Leader of the Opposition, to vary the order of business. This will enable the viewing public to benefit from the Council tax debate with an enhanced number of speakers. This will mean 10 speakers per group instead of 6 speakers per group. Accordingly, I am varying the order of business to enable this earlier debate, followed by questions to the Leader and Cabinet, with the item on school admissions taken last. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Apologies were received from Councillor John Wentworth.
Councillor Pat Ryan.
Apologies from Councillor Hameen Kabaya.
Any other apologies? Agenda item 2, minutes. Does the Council approve the minutes of the full Council meeting held on 26 January 2015 as a correct record? Please say aye. Agenda item 3, disclosure of interest. Can members please say aye to confirm that their disclosure of interest forms are accurate and up to date? Any other disclosures that members may wish to make during the meeting should be made orally. Agenda item 4, urgent business. There is no business under this item. Agenda item 5, announcements. I only have a few announcements to make. Firstly, thanks to all of you for supporting my charity events so far. There is a fish and chips lunch at the award-winning McDermott's on Tuesday, the 10th of March. There are still some tickets left. There is also a golf day at Selston Park Hotel on Thursday, the 19th of March, organised by my friend Councillor Stuart Collins. I would encourage members from both sides of the Council to book a team or more. I will be doing a sponsorship walk from Whittington Hospital to Mansion House in my mayoral robe and chain on Sunday, the 1st of March. Sponsorship forms are on your desk, and we hope to see them completed and send them back to the office as quickly as possible, please. There is an opportunity to make your donation through a Just Giving page, and the link is on the sponsorship form. We look forward to getting the support from all the members of the Council, their family and friends. Councillor Newman, do you have any announcements to make?
Nothing to announce, Madam Mayor.
Agenda item 8, Council tax debate. To debate the recommendations of the Cabinet in respect of the following reports: General Fund and HRA Budget 2015-16 and Financial Strategy 2015-19, Treasury Management Strategy Statement, Minimum Revenue Provision Policy Statement and Annual Investment Strategy 2015-16. The Chief Executive will now remind members of the rules for the Council tax debate.
The Leader of the Council will speak first and will be followed by the Leader of the Opposition. Each will have 10 minutes. Next, 9 members of each group will each speak for no more than 3 minutes. Finally, the Leader will exercise the right to reply and in doing so speak for no more than 5 minutes.
Councillor Newman, before you begin, may I confirm that you are moving the recommendations, and Councillor Butler, are you seconding?
To confirm, I am moving the recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I second the recommendations.
Will the Leader of the Council, Councillor Tony Newman, please open the debate? You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. They say a week is a long time in politics, and it is. But in the 9 months since Labour won our historic victory last June, we have literally seen the birth of a new Croydon. A Croydon where hope has replaced fear, where ambition and aspiration have replaced stagnation, and a Croydon where the Council is truly on the side of the people of our town. Croydon's Labour Council, a London Living Wage Council, domestic violence a priority, Don't Mess with Croydon launched and progress now visible, a Fairness and Opportunity Commission launched, affordable housing requirements at 30%, a private landlord's licensing scheme consulted on, growth borough status agreed with central government and the GLA, a council procurement strategy change to support local business, the return of the summer festival, a developing arts and cultural strategy, a proactive business growth policy and much more. So, Madam Mayor, I'm proud to be leader of our Labour administration tonight as we announce a freeze in council tax and announce the lowest rent increase in London, whilst as a Labour administration we are both protecting and investing in key frontline services. Can I take this opportunity to thank all the officers who worked so hard to help us deliver the budget, and Simon Hall and the front bench team for the sterling work they've done in putting this budget together, and the entire Labour group for embracing the principle of a 3-year budget strategy overview and radical transformation of council structures to put people and a sense of place first. To set Croydon on course to become the country's first truly digital council, and to ensure we have the ability and structures in place to deliver quality services for the people of Croydon, despite ongoing cuts in real terms to funding public services. Madam Mayor, a year ago, Councillor Fisher suggested Labour were in Never Never Land when we talked about freezing council tax and ending the year-on-year tax hikes that cost households £158 extra and saw council tax reach record levels under 8 long years of Croydon Tories. Well, we are firmly in the real world tonight, a world where people voted for a Labour council, a world where 88% of reported fly tips are cleared within 48 hours, a world where investors are developing serious money into Croydon and embracing our 30% affordable housing policy, a world where the London living wage is now council policy, and a world where local companies, both small and large, are actively encouraged and supported to bid for council contracts, and a world where, as council leader, I am, along with colleagues, working hard to bring new companies to Croydon and proactively working with existing ones to ensure we keep them in Croydon. Madam Mayor, the previous administration, with Councillor Fisher's £100 million funding black hole, Croydon Advertiser, May the 30th, 2014, threatened to bankrupt the council. What we didn't know then were parts of the last Tory administration were also morally bankrupt. Councillor Fisher took his extra thousands, and 4 others on the side opposite also threatened to do so. If those claims had been followed through, it would have cost the people of Croydon over £80,000. And why that matters is because we are debating this council's budget in the chamber tonight, and that money would have come directly out of it. Madam Mayor, this budget has got proposals in it. No one's saying it's 100% perfect, but what I can say is every single budget proposal in here is for the benefit of the people of Croydon, not the politicians of Croydon. And finally, regarding colleagues opposite, I know from those of you I've been in with discussion with in my office that there is a real appetite from a growing number of Conservative councillors for that new politics we're trying to shape in Croydon, and I welcome that. Madam Mayor, our budget proposals tonight are based on sound economics and sound values to fund those policy choices we are making. Values that will see Croydon achieve white ribbon status for our groundbreaking work on tackling the hate crime of domestic violence. Values that have seen us put in place Croydon's first ever Fairness and Opportunity Commission. And can I thank the Bishop of Croydon for the sterling work he's already doing in leading so eloquently the Commission's work. Values and policies that are, as our Ambitious for Croydon manifesto stated, are there to ensure the maximum number of Croydon residents genuinely have the opportunity to benefit from the investment that is now flowing into Croydon. Reform of the private rented sector, local jobs and housing for local people, our fantastic Ambition Festival that Councillor Godfrey is launching in March, values that support 20-mile-an-hour zones because they save lives of often the very young or elderly, values that are protecting and enhancing our Meals on Wheels service, and will see a Young People's Fairness and Opportunity Commission launched shortly. Madam Mayor, our administration and our town are making very real progress, but in the years ahead, real challenges remain. And to meet them, we must retain a tight grip of the town hall budgets, whilst driving hard the growth agenda that can, if handled correctly, and within the framework of the values I've already talked about, create high-quality jobs and training and opportunities, and oversee a cultural renaissance in Croydon. But there is much work to do. Because, Madam Mayor, despite some welcome progress over the last decade, nowhere near enough young people from a state education background go on to attend from Croydon the top 42 Russell Group of universities. Nowhere near enough of our young people go on to sit in the boardrooms of the top 100 companies in the country, and nowhere near enough young people from Croydon are truly being given the opportunities to fulfil their own precious and unique true personal potential. Madam Mayor, Croydon should be proud that we now have Councillor Elisa Fleming leading on this agenda, because there is no greater advocate for the young people of our borough, and Lisa will leave no stone unturned to secure that future. So we've turned the oil tanker around. We're moving away from the rocks. We have set a new course, a modern European city made up of vibrant and multicultural district and town centres, a place where ambition has no limits and everyone's true potential will be recognised. The Council leading by example, council tax frozen, budgets balanced, ambition and innovation at the heart of all we do. But, Madam Mayor, there is one further change we require. We require a change of government on May the 7th so this Labour Council can truly work in partnership with a Labour government. We require the election of Sarah Jones in Croydon Central and Steve Reid in Croydon North to sit on the front bench of a Labour government, making the case for Croydon, making the case for funding in Croydon, delivering services for Croydon, and not a Member of Parliament sitting in Westminster voting to cut the services for Croydon. If we're truly going to deliver that jobs and growth agenda, then it's a Labour Council working in partnership with a Labour government, ending the obscenity of 0 hours contract, ending the obscenity of the heroes that work for the NHS being pushed to the limits and beyond as we see real pressures grow on our local services. It's time that on May the 7th, the town will have the opportunity in Croydon Central, the country will have the opportunity, as the people did in Croydon last year, to reject fear, to reject the austerity measures, to reject the attacks on local government, to reject the scandal of year-on-year cuts, not only voted for by Gavin Barwell, but he's driven other Tory MPs through the lobby in Westminster to support that programme. Madam Mayor, this budget that we are putting before the people of Croydon tonight is freezing their council tax in tough times, but we recognise that's still one of the most significant bills that many households will have to face, and we have to ensure that we remain on top of the council's finances in the years ahead to deliver those services and truly transform our town for the 21st century. But I'm proud tonight, as the Labour leader, to put Labour's first budget in 9 years before this council, to put public services first, to put the people of this town first, to put hope over austerity first, and actually be on the side of the people of Croydon, a Labour council working for the people of Croydon, a Labour council looking forward to working with a Labour government on behalf of the people of Croydon. I move the budget.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Tim Pollard. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'm going to start by doing something that I will only do once tonight, which is agreeing with the Leader of the Opposition. But that is in joining him in thanking the officers of the Council for their sterling work, as always, in the preparation of the budget. As someone who's been involved with the preparation of 8 Conservative budgets over the past 8 years, I know from first hand the amount of time and effort that goes into it, and it's nice to see that whilst the quality of the decision-making may be somewhat questionable, the quality of officers' work remains excellent. We've heard a lot tonight from Councillor Newman about how awful a national coalition government is for making him do such horrid things. We've heard a lot about the £100 million black hole he frequently claims to have inherited, and of course who he's inherited it from depends on who he's talking to. Sometimes it's from the previous Conservative Council, sometimes it's from the government, as you might have noticed in the recent posters that cropped up like mushrooms around the town. So passionate was he about this £100 million excuse that he keeps trotting out, that he'd ordered these posters to appear everywhere as if by magic, and then suddenly they disappeared again. Quite extraordinary. Apparently Councillor Newman had forgotten that there was an imminent election, and therefore putting them up was perhaps not the cleverest idea. So that's another few £1,000s of taxpayers' money down the Swanee. Let's have a look at the truth behind these £100 million claims. Is there a black hole? If so, who created it? What are the Conservatives' plans for local government? What would Ed Miliband do if the country had the deep misfortune to wake up on the 6th of May to find Ed being shoehorned into number 10 by Alex Salmond and the Scott Nats? The coalition government has had to reduce many areas of public spending, but it is worth reminding ourselves why they had to do that. Because in the 10 years from 1998 to 2008, the Labour government virtually bankrupted this country. The Well, you complain. It just happens to be a fact. The key date, Madam Mayor, is the 14th of July 1998. It was on the 14th of July 1998 that Gordon Brown announced he was going to depart from the strict curbs on public spending he'd inherited from the Conservative government that Tony Blair's government replaced, and he was about to let rip with public spending. As The Economist put it at the time, it was the moment when the Iron Chancellor morphed into Father Christmas. And to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, he was so busy, Gordon Brown, feeling pleased with himself that he could, he forgot to ask himself whether he should. In 1997, public spending stood at $322 billion. 12 years later, it had more than doubled to $650 billion. The proportion of the economy relating to the public sector had increased from less than a third to over a half. The problem was we couldn't afford this massive splurge in state spending. Even now, after 5 years of what some call austerity, we are still spending more than we earn. The rate at which we're doing it is less than it was. It's half what it was in 2010 when the Labour government left office. But nobody can seriously suggest that it is wrong for the government to progressively reduce its spending until, across a whole economic cycle, it is likely to balance its books. Even the Labour Party stalwart Ken Livingstone agrees, and it's very rare I find myself agreeing with him. In a speech in late 2013, he accused the then Labour government of cowardice, and he used that word, cowardice, in racking up such a mountain of debt, and he urged any future Labour government not to do the same. Well, certainly. I'm glad you asked me that, because this is important background. Rather than constantly carp on about the Coalition's successful measures to mend our broken economy, Councillor Newman would actually be better advised to focus his wrath on the men who did this to us: Gordon Brown, Ed Balls, Ed Miliband. You may recognise a couple of those last names. And before launching silly poster campaigns blaming everyone else for the decisions he must now make, he should talk to Ed Balls about his plans, because Balls has made it abundantly clear that if Labour win the general election, there will be no more money for local councils. Here's a quote: "There will be no additional funding for local government unless we can find the money from somewhere else, but we have not been able to do that in the case of local government." Not my words, they're Balls. January 2015 on the BBC. So that's the context of the problem. But what about this £100 million black hole that Councillor Newman keeps banging on about? That's not like the budget deficit or the mountain of debt, which Labour quite definitely did pass on to the coalition government. That £100 million is actually the sum total of pressures on the Council's budget over the next 3 years. So is this £100 million figure new or unprecedented? No. It's almost exactly the same figure that the Conservative Council was looking at having to find back in 2011 over its last 3 years. It's a different £100 million, but it's roughly the same number. Now, we dealt at the time with our £100 million pressure by a mixture of pressing down on costs, resisting the temptation to add lots of new pet projects, which is something I have to say that Labour have not been able to resist. The government pressed, quite rightly, the then Conservative Council to deliver services more efficiently, and we delivered. So will Labour. If you're not going to be able to deliver the efficiencies in the way that the Conservatives did, you should be honest and explain to people how it was that we could do it, but you apparently can't. And if you believe you're going to succeed in delivering similar services at a lower cost, then you need to stop wasting time telling people that the government is wrong to ask you to do it. And you can stop claiming as well to have frozen council tax this year. You haven't. Every household will pay £25 more this year than last year. And I am sure that is the first of many tax rises we will see from this new administration, if history is any guide. Looking at what you've done in terms of tenants, you have cancelled the 2-week rent holiday introduced by my friend and colleague Councillor Dudley Mead last year, which will cost each tenant in council housing about £200. So on the one hand, you haven't frozen their council tax, and on the other hand, you've taken away £200 from a lot of the most vulnerable and hard-pressed citizens of our borough. We see an administration that's presiding in chaos over the pension fund. The Council is about a third of the way along a 25-year deficit recovery plan to raise the value of the fund from around £450 million in 2006 to £1 billion by 2030. It's manifestly wrong that the Council doesn't budget this into its capital value. It's also abundantly clear that the policies of this Council are going to make it impossible for it to meet that, the funding requirement that it has. And in the end, the pain of that will fall on council taxpayers, because unlike many other funds, this one is underwritten by local taxpayers. So we look forward to that being dealt onto the back of unfortunate residents as well. In terms of the capital budget, we saw a lot before the election, a lot of claims in Labour literature that the previous Conservative administration was borrowing over £1 billion. Actually, it wasn't. But the new Labour Council will be. But in spite of that, and in spite of the £10 million yielded by the sale of a small proportion of the Riesco collection, it's only able to find in its capital budget a commitment to £12 million for Fairfield. So that's a net £2 million that this council, which claims to be on the side of culture, is proposing to put forward for our biggest cultural jewel. We see cuts in the roads budget. One of the things that residents have said most often to me when I'm out knocking doorsteps, and you won't be surprised to know that at the moment we're knocking on quite a lot of doorsteps, one of the things that people have said in large numbers is they're really pleased to see their road being resurfaced. Well, I mean, you can expect that to end if Labour continue for the rest of the 4 years in the way that this budget sets out, because we can see the road repair budget dwindling, we can see the proportion it will go into repairing potholes increasing, and the amount that will go to properly resurfacing roads for the long term dwindle away to virtually nothing. We've seen almost total failure of this Labour administration to actually build new council houses. Councillor Mead, again, was extremely effective in terms of generating the largest number of council houses that we'd seen in this borough for many a long year. That has ended under Labour, and new council tenants will be very sad to see that. This budget is all about choices. We've seen a number of choices made, and fair enough, when you win an election, you implement your manifesto. But the choices you're making look a bit peculiar to most residents. Instead of focusing on the things that matter most and are closest to them, they see a council that seems to prefer a fairness commission to actually worrying about the services that they use every day. Instead of worrying about festivals, you should be worrying about the Fairfield Halls and making sure that one of the finest concert halls in the entire country is safe in your tenure. I hope it is, but there is nothing in this budget to give you any kind of comfort that that is so. You talked about one of the things you want to see as a Labour government. Actually, the thing that terrifies residents more than anything else is the thought of Ed Miliband shoehorned into number 10 by Alex Salmond. That is a deeply alarming prospect. We have an excellent MP in Croydon Central, and I am absolutely confident that the people of Croydon Central will wish to re-elect Gavin Barwell in May. Councillor Benn, I am terribly sorry that your leader forgot to mention you in his list of people who will become Labour MPs. I suppose there may be a reason for that, but I think you should have got an honourable mention, if nothing else. So I have no confidence that this administration can deliver its budget. The last 3 months... It's a very good point. I didn't mention Chris Phil and Billy Mohan. Fair enough. Fair cop. I hold my hands up. I have no confidence that this Labour administration can deliver this budget. The last 3 months has shown an administration in chaos, flip-flopping backwards and forwards, school playing fields, the tenant tax, Pearly Pool, up and down posters. So I can't support this budget. It's a weak flip-flopping administration which has shown itself incapable of taking or implementing tough decisions. And its failure to produce a budget for the long term will come back to haunt it.
Can you wind up, please?
I have now finished.
Thank
you very much, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Simon Holt to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, this budget sets out a new approach and direction for the Council, focus on residents' priorities and this Labour administration's manifesto. We have already shown over the last 8 months the difference we can make by targeted use of limited funds, like improving street cleaning, extra police in New Addington, free swimming, the summer festival and much more. But before I go on, I do want to put this budget in context. Since 2010, we've seen the Tory-led government's onslaught on local government, and this is clear it will continue if we saw the disaster of a Tory government after May. It's not just the massive cuts in the absolute value of grants, it's the failure to fund inflation, the failure to fund demographic pressures, the failure to fully fund changes in responsibilities. A requirement for savings of some 200 million in 7 years since 2010, and over the next 3 years, some 100 million to be found. Not my words, the former leader of the opposition, leader of the council, former leader of the opposition's words. In reaction, we have not bemoaned Croydon's fate, not cut essential services with knee-jerk, short-termist decisions, not made ideological choices. That was the Tory way. We have worked up the growth promise aimed at increased devolved powers and funding. We have shown our willingness to take an active role in regeneration. We have looked at using the Council's spending power to support residents. We've taken a total different approach to the Council's services, driven by delivering for residents. The budget has been set starting from a realistic base, looking at a 3-year time horizon, allowing proper strategy implementation. Capital has been focused on delivering on what matters to our borough, like school places, regeneration, culture and improved service delivery, not vanity projects such as the HQ. And on Fairfield Halls, we always saw 3-5-year figures with big numbers and not a penny spent. Concrete proposals are being delivered there. We have prioritised frontline services, the ones that make a difference to our residents. We're shaping an organisation that will have a truly joined-up approach. We've invested in areas that need it, vulnerable children and adults, where more than £6 million of growth has been put in. We've looked at all aspects of enabling core costs to reduce those. That's why my portfolio areas have some 13 million of savings in this coming year to protect the front line. We're making the most of the council assets. We're using technology and process improvement across the council to produce major savings, to be state-of-the-art. And we're going away from the outsourced good, in-house bad of the last administration. We're looking to in-house things. We're looking for partnerships, voluntary sector and hybrid options, rather than going for classic procurement. And now contracts will have real levers, strengthened professional contract management to ensure that the residents of Croydon get the services they deserve, and delivered at value for money for the taxpayer. Madam Mayor, even in these difficult financial times, this budget delivers our ambitions for Croydon, and I commend it to the Chamber. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Jason Cummings to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a budget with just one aim. Don't let anyone really see what we're doing until the general election is out of the way and people will realise what is actually going on in Croydon. Indeed, being the inspiration for how this budget was set is one of the few things that Silent Sarah has actually done recently. I was stopping on the way home from a very late council meeting. I think you were in the chair, Sean. And picking some food up from a local restaurant when I was approached by some of my residents, and they said, "Oh, we haven't seen the Labour candidate at our door yet. You know, the one with the famous grandfather." It's like, hang on a second. Emily Benn standing in Croydon South, not in Croydon Central. Budgets usually have 3 sets of fingerprints on them. The first, those of the officers, and I have to say that, as has already been said this evening, the officers have done an excellent job again this year, as in previous years, in terms of pulling together all the detail for this budget. The other 2 sets are usually those of a leader and their finance lead. This budget is no exception. Indeed, much can be read from these fingerprints. Croydon Labour seems to be following the pattern that Labour has set out nationally over recent years, of having a leader and a finance lead that fight like cats in a bag over what they are doing. First, we had Blair and Brown, where Brown continuously, with his financial mismanagement, undermined what Blair was doing. And now we have Miliband and Balls banging their heads together, unable to work together towards a common goal. Croydon is actually no different in this, though you may laugh. Councillor Hall sits in his tower, coming up with his plans, apparently telling no one about them and then putting them into cabinet papers, sure in the knowledge that no one else will have read them before they actually reach cabinet. The playing fields fiasco is a case in point. All of the fingerprints on that were those of Councillor Hall. All of the detail that came out about it was from Councillor Hall. All of the examples were in Councillor Hall's own ward. And yet when it came to the leader, he seemed to know nothing about it. Indeed, his only intervention was to do the U-turn that stopped it. The first of many U-turns. And as Councillor Newman desperately tries to save the reputation of the man, which I'm sure he now regrets appointing, it's not restricted only to councillors as well. Councillor Hall recently also managed to create a train wreck for one of his parliamentary candidates' campaign with one swift stroke of his closure pen, only for that to end up with Councillor Newman doing another U-turn for him. Where will this end up? Well, in the short term, I'm sure they will appear eating ice creams together in a show of unity very soon. But in the long term, well, I think it's safe to say that both of them are thinking about a shuffling of roles on the Labour front bench. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Elisa Fleming to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm proud to support this Labour administration's budget to implement the much-needed change that this borough so desperately needs after the previous administration's lack of support for a number of our residents in the borough. Despite a £100 million black hole, we have allowed innovation to push us into a new realm, a realm where people matter the most. Our values should push us to want the best for all, and that is what this Labour administration is doing. What will we continue to do? A family-friendly approach towards jobs that allow flexible working so that parents can fit work around their family life. Flexible and affordable childcare, and affordable housing that means people aren't stuck in situations that they no longer want to be in. I spoke to a lady today and I was really moved by her story and her plight. She'd been to the Family Justice Centre and was a victim of an abusive relationship, and she so desperately wants to leave that relationship but is fearful for her safety and that of her children if she asks for help and support to leave that situation. We should never, as a council, find ourselves whatever side of the chambers that we sit on, where we have people within our borough that feel that they have nowhere that they can go to. And far too often within, whether it just be Croydon or other boroughs, we find ourselves in this situation. So we need to continue to protect our frontline services and the support that it offers to the people that we say or we seek to represent. So affordable housing should most definitely be at the forefront of everything that we're doing, and I'm proud to support the changes that we have already made and continue to support a 30% affordable housing in every scheme that we provide. A ban on zero-hour contracts so that all people again within the borough, our young people especially, are able to go home with a wage that is able to support their families. Only 3% of vacancies in London are for part-time roles over £20,000, and Londoners receive a lower pay for part-time work than the UK average. The lack of quality part-time and flexible work is a key driver for family poverty, and the only way that we can really fight that is to ensure that everybody is paid at least the minimum wage. To continue to support the payment of the London living wage and ensure that those at the bottom are better placed to meet their basic costs. We find ourselves in a difficult situation when you have people that aren't even able to pay both their gas and their electric bill. And far too often, again in Croydon, I'll be finishing, Madam Mayor, we find ourselves in a situation where this is the case. So, in supporting this budget today, I commend the work that we have begun, and I commend the work that we will continue to push to change the Croydon for the better. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Yvette Hopley to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak today on the council tax debate. It's a very important day when we set the council tax, and the budget that we have here has an impact on every resident in our borough. Are we going to deliver the best possible outcome for those residents, and are the decisions being taken right? Well, we've already heard from Councillor Pollard and Councillor Cummins, and I don't believe that is the case. I want to pick up on a significant failing, and I think it's basically with the governance arrangements and the lack of understanding and knowledge of the impact of the decisions that you're actually taking and the consequences to residents when things actually go wrong. I want you to refer to page 79, item 711, which refers to the growth area for the pensions of 0.984 million. And I'm sure you've already read the pages, because you always read your documents, don't you, in relation to redundancy on page 148. I'm not sure whether you all understand the implications of what's written within these papers, because I don't have confidence that you fully understand that those liabilities are underwritten by the taxpayer. And we will not be delivering anything if we don't meet those liabilities. Now, Councillor Hall sees himself as a sole trader. He doesn't actually see himself as somebody, as a member of the Pension Committee. And I have to explain that because this is a £750 million fund. This is money that belongs to people who either in a receipt of the pension, who have paid into the pension, or are still making contributions. And so this is supposed to be a non-political fund. So I just, unfortunately, will have to outline here, I've got the occasion to do this, what your financial guru has done so far. He fired without consultation with the committee our financial advisor, who had been on the committee for 20 years. He fired without consultation with the committee the co-opted member who had advised on our property portfolio. He then fired all the fund managers who were responsible for the equity mandates and stuffed all the money in an ethical fund. This is all very interesting, we thought. Conservative members were extremely worried and asked on numerous occasions to meet with this equity manager who was holding this money. He must have been exhausted, gone home, had a cup of tea and thought, how can I fire the rest of them? Difficult to fire councillors on a pension committee. I know what I'll do, he thought. What I will do is preclude them from speaking to the equity managers. Councillor Wentworth, I'm
Councillor
sorry,
Hockley, the time is
not
up.
here, and Councillor Hall both decided that we couldn't see them. Only one member could go and see them. Now, the Law Commission states... Yeah, this is very important, I'm afraid. This is very important. I've got to finish now.
No.
I've just got 2 more sentences and then I have to finish.
Councillor Hockley, can you please sit down?
The consequences
Councillor
for
Hockley,
this
can
means
you sit
that
down?
the fund is now running with a margin of only 781
Councillor Hockley,
stocks.
can you please sit down?
Something
Nobody's listening.
That the actual
Can you sit down?
residents are going to have to pick
Councillor
up
Hockley.
the bill for. Thank you.
Councillor Hockley.
Madam Mayor, just on a point of personal explanation, in particular, given that Councillor Hockley has misled this chamber about the actions of the Pension Committee in the absence of the chair of the Pension Committee, whose apologies were given earlier. Right? This misrepresentation at best of the events and what happened, including a number of items that actually went to formal pension committee, cannot be allowed to stand. I hope that Councillor Hockley, even if she shows disrespect to you, Madam Mayor, will actually have the honesty to apologise and withdraw her allegation.
Councillors, can I...
I'm sorry, that's a statement of fact.
Can you please
it's a
sit down?
statement of fact. I've had to go to the council solicitor over this matter. He's called me a liar. This is a statement
How
of
many
fact.
times do I have to ask you to sit down? I am giving you my first warning, Councillor Hockley. This is not the way councillors should be behaving in the council chamber. I don't accept that kind of behaviour in my chamber. I will not accept that. Can I remind all the councillors, you have to keep it to your 3 minutes. Otherwise, I have to ask you to stop your speech. So I'm going to call on Councillor Louisa Woodley to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll wait for... Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. In supporting this budget, I'd just like to say in adult health and social care, in spite of cuts of up to 18% from this Tory-led coalition government and the lack of funding for new responsibilities, This Labour administration is increasing spending in several areas. More than £500,000 this year to ensure that we do a better job in looking after people who can no longer make their own decisions. An extra £1 million for the increased number of children with disabilities moving to adult services, with another £500,000 for next year. In mental health, in our new revised strategy, we have listened to service users and allocated almost £250,000 extra so that people can have access to services such as talking therapies. Madam Mayor, we've been able to allocate extra funding in some areas because we've made savings through procurement. For example, in home care and support, we've joined up provisions where quality and standards are not only higher, but we've insisted that as a London living wage employer, all our providers pay the London living wage. Madam Mayor, our Tory colleagues opposite said it couldn't be done, but it is being done. And it removes the scandal of care workers having to do several jobs because they cannot afford to live off their wages and are consequently too dog-tired to provide a decent standard of care to our most vulnerable citizens. In Meals and Wheels, as a result of reprocurement and working with community groups, we can deliver hot meals and, in some cases, cook hot meals for older people in their homes, as well as at the same time making substantial savings on the contract. And Madam Mayor, here in Croydon, the Council, working with the CCG, NHS and voluntary sector, are leading the way with our proposals for looking after the over 65s. This will see us not only deliver more comprehensive joined-up services, keeping people in their own homes, but also provide savings of almost £1 million in 2016-17 and more than £3 million in 17-18. But, Madam Mayor, if I could now turn to my ward, New Addington. In this budget, we've listened to the people of New Addington, and we've put New Addington first. We've already removed the hated boulders, as well as making sure that their streets are clean. We've provided free swimming for our youngsters in the summers, and we have plans to have a new leisure centre in place. And, Madam Mayor, I can announce tonight that as from the 1st of April, we will have 2 extra police officers on the beat in New Addington. Madam Mayor, in short, Labour administration listening to our communities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Maria Gatlin to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know everyone here wants the very best for children and young people in Croydon, and I am pleased that the former Conservative administration really improved standards in our schools since we began in 2006. But of course there is some way to go, and we're in new territory now with the Mutual, and the Mutual will be delivering school improvement on behalf of the Council. So I really hope that the savings of almost £1 million will be achieved and the focus will remain firmly on school improvement. Because, as we know, and indeed as the Croydon Advertiser has recently highlighted, we lose many talented and high-achieving pupils every year to schools out of the borough or to independent education in Croydon. And as long, of course, as there are grammar schools in adjoining boroughs and none here, that will continue. The challenge is, of course, to improve all our schools for all our pupils of all abilities. And it's interesting to note there is, of course, great work that goes on in Croydon schools. Interesting to note that Coloma has made the Sunday Times list of the best 200 state-maintained schools. It is, of course, a faith school, a convent school, and run by nuns. Perhaps you ought to mention that to Tristan Hunt, MP. I do welcome the investment in primary school places, but I am concerned about the lack of planning for the increased demand for secondary school places that we can expect. I mean, other than the 16 million for the arena site and the hope that a free school might happen here and there, I don't see any sensible plan. Where is the ambition here for parents and children? It's just not here, and I think they deserve a lot better than that. There's a lot of growth protecting looked after children in the budget. I welcome that, but I wonder how sustainable it is, because the attempt to claw back funding, for example, the Looked After Children's Review, looks to me, given the pressures that I know are on this area, not very realistic. So, along with that, and coupled with the fact that, as we know, this Labour Council cannot manage money, I do have concerns for the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Stuart King to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Even in a time of extreme and unprecedented austerity, local authorities can still make a difference for the communities that they serve. And, Madam Mayor, the budget before us this evening does exactly that. I want to focus on the huge strides we've taken to clean up the streets of Croydon and the plans we have to continue that, which will be funded by this budget this evening. Since taking office, this council has achieved a great deal. We've undertaken over 400 duty of care visits to shops and businesses to ensure that they have proper trade waste agreements in place. We've introduced 3 rapid response trucks to proactively patrol our hotspot areas, removing fly tips on a daily basis. We've introduced additional evening street sweeping rotas to ensure, as far as possible, whatever time you walk our streets, they're clean and free from litter. And to do all of this, we've recruited staff to fill the 9 enforcement vacancies that the previous administration had deliberately kept vacant. And to date, we've secured 6 court orders allowing us to seize vehicles involved in fly tipping, and we've already prosecuted and named and shamed 2 people involved in fly tipping, more than the previous administration managed in 4 years. Madam Mayor, something that Councillor Collins and I have worked hard to achieve and to make happen. We now have one of the most successful fly tip removal rates in London. 88% of fly tips are removed from the streets of Croydon within 48 hours of being reported. We are not just leading the way in Croydon, we are leading the way in London. Colleagues, our Don't Mess with Croydon campaign is working. Madam Mayor, much of the success of the campaign, though, has come as a result of the commitment, the enthusiasm, the drive and the leadership of one councillor in particular. A councillor who is Mr. Optimism at all times. No, not Councillor Thomas. I give you the Cabinet Member for Clean and Green Croydon, our very own Diego Costa of this Labour administration. Madam Mayor, in all seriousness, the people that we want to thank this evening are actually the residents of Croydon, because without their participation and support, Don't Mess with Croydon would only ever make a difference on the margins. And that's why we're so proud that nearly 200 residents already have signed up to be Clean and Green Street Champions. They're at the heart of the community clean-ups that are taking place on a weekly basis. Only this weekend, the cadets from the Coulsdon and Purley Air Training Corps signed up as street champions. We thank them and we thank everyone for doing their bit.
I call on Councillor Margaret Mead to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Well, Councillor Woodley inherited a good budget with significant growth for this year for those suffering from mental health disorders and similarly young people for their support services. At Cabinet last week, she mentioned integrated framework agreement, integrated commissioning unit, the improvement for people who are aged over 65. All our policies were brought forward, and they're all going to be delivering savings in the next 3 years. So, Councillor Hall, that wasn't stagnation, was it? Now, 300,000 is a very good sum of money to help with interventions, and you mentioned talking therapies. I know you're very much in favour of those, but I would urge you, because you know the benefits of those early interventions, and that saves complex issues afterwards, to see whether you can invest more early, because the cost later will rise. And you know that the people appreciate those talking therapies, because you've said so publicly. The Meals on Wheels service is under threat of change, and that is of a concern to me. I've listened to what's been said tonight, but members here should realise that over 2,000 hot meals are served each week, and since appointing Appetito, there has not been one complaint in all the years of their service, but many compliments. So the hot meal is very important. It's not only the hot meal, it's that contact that's made on a daily basis. Will that still be there? The rumour is out that maybe they're going to have frozen meals and be cooking them in a microwave. Now, that concerns me. If that is the case and you are considering that for any of the residents in Croydon, I suggest that you, Councillor Woodley and Councillor Hall, visit these people and see, because their frailty will not be appropriate for them to do that. But, Councillor Woodley, since you took over, the overspend on care packages has risen fast. It's in the red to the tune of 2.3 million for Q2. And a massive 3.5 million in Q3. This sounds very familiar, just like last time Labour were in office. Year on year, the overspend was around 3 million. Whereas we saw that the budget came in on budget, and if there was an overspend, it was never to the tune of 3 million. Councillor Woodley, I think you've lost control of your budget. You have no option but to make further service cuts to the vulnerable and elderly across the borough, people who do need these services, and they will be having less care. So I'm not sure that this is a budget that protects key frontline services. But one thing I'm very sure about, this budget shows that it is a repeat performance. We've seen it before. Labour just cannot manage money. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Hamida Ali to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, I wish to add my support for the Council tax and revenue budget presented to members this evening, and I would also like to give my thanks to all of the officers involved, led by the Cabinet, in what has been a phenomenally difficult challenge. This budget is both responsible and a fairer one. It seeks to protect the front line while national government continues to protect Whitehall. Since 2010, this authority has seen severe reductions to its budget, which now total 46% over the period, and with this year seeing the sharpest single cut at almost 15%. To compound matters further, neither need nor population drive the funding formula for central government grants any longer. It is against this backdrop that this Labour administration has delivered against many of its election pledges set out in our manifesto, Ambitious for Croydon, almost 9 months to the day after winning control of the council. The budget before us is also a longer-term budget, presenting in principle the outlook over 3 years, but with flexibility to respond to the findings of the Opportunity and Fairness Commission, of which I'm proud to be Vice-Chair. Madam Mayor, this administration has already developed a strong track record on tackling inequality and promoting fairness, paying the London living wage, doubling the affordable housing minimum for development and putting a stop to office space being converted into substandard housing, setting the lowest rents in London in order to fund badly needed improvements to our housing stock, regeneration in previously neglected parts of the borough, and additional independent domestic violence advocates embedded in Croydon University Hospital and the Metropolitan Police Services Community Safety Unit. All that said, Madam Mayor, we know there is so much still to do, and this administration is determined to make further traction against continuing inequality. On pay, when 1 in 4 residents earns less than the London living wage, and where 1/3 of people in Croydon say they're struggling financially. On jobs, when too few jobs in the borough are high skill and high pay, and we need to boost the numbers of people in the borough working in professional, scientific and technical roles. On growth, ensuring that everyone benefits from the retail and other business investment in the town centre. On housing, where we've seen an increase in homelessness, 2,000 people in temporary accommodation and almost 5,500 on the housing register. And on public health, where we know that there is nearly a decade's worth of life expectancy difference between different parts of the borough. This budget reflects Labour's values, and despite the Leader of the Opposition's fundamental lack of understanding of inequality, I look forward to the Opportunity and Fairness Commission making a positive and youthful contribution to the administration's best efforts to make further ground towards a fairer future for all. I support the budget.
I call on Councillor Dudley Mead to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to deal with the housing revenue and council rents. I completely agree with Councillor Butler that rents, including garages, should be increased by 2.2%. Bearing in mind that over 70% of the tenants get some help towards their rental costs, it is important to maximise revenue and follow the Conservative coalition government guidelines as is the right course of action. Members may recall that 12 months ago she criticised me for following similar government guidelines. Amazing what 12 months in a year and the difference a year and an election makes. But where I disagree with Councillor Butler is that she's not following on the actions that we introduced last year and giving the tenants a 2-week rent-free period at the beginning of April. I said last year I would continue the practice year on year. Rent collection at 99% plus has continued at a record high. Now, Labour frequently talk about helping the needy in our society. They've done so tonight. And here's an easy opportunity for them to do so, and they've declined. The 2 weeks are affordable. Some years back, the district auditor criticised me for having £5 million left in the HRA. The budget projection for 2016 is £15 million plus. Now, Councillor Butler says she'll spend the money on new houses. Fine. But her record since May 2014 does not support that view. She inherited 41 part-built council houses, only 2 have been completed in the intervening 9 months. And in my experience, it does take more than a year for you to get a scheme off the ground to deliver. Now, my second area of concern was highlighted at the recent Tenants and Leaseholders panel. A verbal resume of the housing service reorganisation was given, and tenants' representatives rightly demanded a written summary for consideration. Now, I've always believed if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. Both under the previous Labour regime and ours, I think a good housing service was provided. Now it's to be broken up. That's something which I disagree with. The net result is 2 long-serving directors are leaving. In addition, and more importantly, the neighbourhood wardens are being taken away and absorbed into the Area Enforcement Officer Service. Now that raises 2 questions. Where is the Housing Act Section 105 statutory consultation? And how can area enforcement officers working for the HRA and the General Fund have their costs justly apportioned? I suspect the HRA, the rent collected that is, will subsidise the General Fund. Tenants suspect this. As well, I think it's against the law. I will be scrutinising that very carefully. And finally, Madam Mayor, very briefly, I was chairman of the Pension Fund for 8 years. I never stopped any member of the committee going to any fund manager meeting. I was declined the opportunity to meet the new fund managers when the changes were proposed. That's a matter of fact.
I call on Councillor Tony Letts to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I really do believe, in listening to the side opposite tonight, that they must walk round this borough of ours with their eyes closed. So I suggest they all go to Specsavers. Because we on this side, we see signs of growth across the skyline. And I am told that we have something like 15 cranes swinging in our borough and into prosperity. In the past almost 10 months, we have set about delivering our manifesto promises. The people of Croydon have seen our determination, our vision, and most of all, our ambition to deliver and create a Croydon that is competitive, vibrant, which supports not only our history, whilst developing us into a truly European city, using Croydon's unrivalled transport links, which sets us apart from neighbouring boroughs, and the benefits this brings to those working, living, visiting, or doing business here cannot be overstated. Later this year, we are opening the first local authority technology hub in Croydon, where start-up tech and micro-businesses will be supported, Madam Mayor, by the local authority, which in turn these businesses will grow jobs, such as those in digital and biotechnology world. Our brokerage scheme is welcomed by businesses, where we can address the needs of current and new businesses and help create a dynamic economy in Croydon with a skilled job-ready workforce. We are a pro-business council, not only supporting the town centre, but equally helping to support our growth in our district centres. We have opened up procurement opportunities to smaller businesses and services, and recently held a value day, endeavouring to ensure that council's commissioning is open to local businesses and the creation of local jobs. We are creating a revolving investment fund, RIF, the principles which were approved by the Cabinet last September as part of the growth plan. In order to deliver the scale of change required for the growth plan, there is a need for Council to play an active role in funding developments. The key aims are very simple. They will support projects which deliver priorities of the growth plan. They will deliver capital and revenue returns to the Council. The RIF will initially be an internal fund separate from our capital programme. We are reviewing opportunities on key strategic sites across the borough where we may be able to work with landowners to accelerate the delivery of development. The project needs to aim to deliver to return of the capital so the fund can revolve, and in a number of cases I believe that there will be more opportunities to deliver long-term returns. We continue to develop contracts with Gatwick and Runway 2. And of course, members will know there is a signed memorandum of understanding, and the leader has supported the airport's plan while speaking to the Davis Commission. Therefore, I support this budget as before us.
I call on Councillor Linhale to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a rather disappointing budget for the culture, leisure and sport portfolio, and really raises rather a lot of questions. Whilst the committed funding to Fairfield Halls of £12 million over the next 3 years is welcomed, there are significant concerns that this will not be enough to give Fairfield the thorough overhaul and major refurbishment which it needs. Fairfield is the jewel in Croydon's culture crown, but it needs sufficient sound investment to update it and ensure its continued success in our town. I know there is a project board working on the programme, and I appreciate Councillor Godfrey's reply to my question, indicating that some work should take place this summer. That is very encouraging. I know too that it is hoped that further monies may be forthcoming in the future, but it's not known if, when or how much. It begs the question, does anybody know, or is it anybody's guess? The Green Spaces budget gives enormous concern and again leaves many questions arising. This year, some £140,000 is being taken out of the budget that supplies our parks with plants and bulbs, repairs the fences and marks out the tennis court, and also plants and prunes the trees lining so many of our streets. Over the next 2 years, it appears that a further £625,000 is being lopped off this budget. That's a massive reduction, but for which there's currently no details available, no answers to what, where, when or how. Croydon has a fantastic reputation for its green spaces. They're well used, much loved, and many are holders of coveted Green Flag Awards. As many of our areas become more built up, it becomes ever more important to cherish and preserve these green spaces, and I'm sure that there will be residents and local groups keen to get involved in looking after their local parks and green spaces, as suggested in the Council question paper tonight. Indeed, I put forward such a proposal from a local cricket club last October, but despite chasing, I actually haven't had a response to that yet. I do, of course, welcome the decision to save Purley Pool for the time being. It seems to me very important to start the discussions with users of the pool as soon as possible so outstanding remedial maintenance and repairs programme can be agreed. It's disappointing then that there's nothing specific in the budget to give reassurance to local residents about the ongoing costs such a programme will need. All in all, the budget appears light on detail,
And I worry that this Labour Council is just hoping that everything will somehow work out all right. Should we all be crossing our fingers, all will all become clear after the 7th of May. It just doesn't seem a very open and transparent way of managing the council finances. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Andrew Rendell to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted and honoured to support this Labour budget and the ambitious for Croydon message that it encompasses. I'd first like to add my congratulations to Councillor Hall and the officers who have managed to produce this budget while suffering a draconian and unfair attack on Croydon by this Conservative-led government. We should all be thankful that even against the backdrop of ideological Tory cuts, this administration has managed to freeze council tax, keep rents low and protect essential frontline services. Importantly, this council is looking to the future, planning for not just 1 but 3 years. I think everyone in this chamber could support that and be thankful that at last we have a governing party in Croydon with a genuine long-term economic plan. I'm sure all of us have heard at some point, what's the use of politics? Doesn't affect me. Well, let's take this budget. It's a large and complicated document, but it imprints a real and lasting impression on the people of Croydon, and I'd like to examine that by looking at the part of Croydon I know best, Ashburton. The headline has to be the old library, which is looking forward to a new lease of life after being saved from the Tory fire sale. £500,000 is being invested in the park, but it's also an investment in the community. The Friends of Ashburton Park have over 90 members, a committee made up of residents and officers who all live within walking distance of the park. They and us have a burning ambition to create the multi-use, self-sufficient community facility everyone wants to see. Why has this happened? Because our budget invests not just in bricks and mortar, but in the community and its future. All the time now, we're hearing from residents the streets in Ashburton are so much cleaner. Don't Mess with Croydon is really hitting home. People are taking pride, and those that don't are being caught and dealt with. Our budget doesn't just invest in more staff and trucks, but in an environment and a pride for Croydon. Parents we talk to in Ashburton want a bright future for their children. They want them to have affordable homes and the chance to study and forge a career in their hometown. Our budget does not just invest in new homes, education, jobs and infrastructure, but hope, opportunity, hard work and aspiration. Yes, along the way we've had to make tough choices, thanks to the cuts David Cameron and his MPs have inflicted upon us. This has made us think creatively about how we operate. Departments working together, reinvigorating our partners who have had no political leadership for years is a way this administration has managed to produce a budget that is fair and protects the front line, while at the same time honouring our manifesto pledge and freezing council tax. That is what this administration promised to do. That is what we have delivered. I support this budget.
I call on Councillor Michael Neal to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the HRA account, as Dudley Mead has explained, the overall reserves will rise from 9.8 million this year to just under 15.5 million in the next financial year. Surely there is now adequate money in the reserves to give council tenants a 2-week rent-free freeze in their rent. The Conservatives spent £1 million last year from the reserves as reward to those tenants who have paid their rents on time. Councillor Simon Hall said the Council is looking at transforming the way it operates in the light of £100 million spending pressures it faces over the next 3 years with the aim of preserving and enhancing frontline services. Councillor Hall has now acknowledged that the £100 million so-called black hole was not left by this previous administration. It is in fact what the Council has to save over the next 3 years. This Labour Council is no different to other authorities, but the general public will comment on your priorities, such as your attempt to close the Purley Pool alongside building a new £17 million pool in New Allington. Some might question your commitment to Fairfield Halls, as you reduced the capital refurbishment spend from £33 million, which the Conservatives pledged, to just over £12 million over the next 3 years. Some might criticise your spending on parks, reducing the budget, particularly Park Hill Park and parks in my ward of Crowham. You cannot trust Labour to make firm financial decisions for the good of the people of Croydon. There is no council tax freeze, as Labour is claiming. They are putting up the tax for every house in Croydon by £25. Only the Conservative Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, has once again given the residents of Croydon a fairer deal by reducing the preceptory charges for the GLA by 1.34%. We must not be led by Labour's council tax freeze. This will most certainly increase council tax over the next 2 years, and then most likely freeze it again for election purposes. Under Labour, hardly any roads were properly resurfaced. They did just 7 roads in 12 years they were in office. All they did was cheap and temporary pothole repairs when they absolutely had to. The Conservative administration since 2006 and again in 2010 had a proper investment in the road budget to properly resurface roads. As you know, Madam Mayor, while Labour were in authority, Croydon was known as the pothole town. We are heading down this bumpy road again, with the road maintenance budget cut by 20%. Labour admit that the Green Garden waste collection is up for review, which involves grass cutting, obviously clearing dead plants and leaves, and costs the council about £1 million a year. There are signs that Labour will start to charge residents for this service in order to try and save some of the £100 million gap. On this side, we oppose all measures to scrap garden or reduce the garden waste collection. Councillor Thomas has stated we introduce garden waste collection for environmental reasons as it helps our recycling figures.
Councillor, can you wind up, please?
Yes. Madam Mayor, history should tell the people of Croydon that you cannot trust Labour with finance. When we return in 2018, we once again will balance the books and set this town on a course to financial prosperity once again. I oppose this council tax motion.
I call on Councillor Mark Watson to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This Conservative government has presided over the biggest drop in living standards since the Second World War. Many of our residents are on zero-hour contracts, while big business does its best to avoid tax. Our most vulnerable have had their benefits cut. Millionaires have had a tax cut. We've seen unprecedented cuts to local government funding. But despite this, we have delivered a balanced budget. We have frozen council tax, and we have done a budget based on our values and the priorities of our residents. Madam Mayor, residents told us they were concerned about antisocial behaviour, enviro-crime and noisy neighbours. So I'm pleased that in my department we've been able to protect frontline enforcement services, make it easier to report noise, and we've introduced a street enforcement team who will issue fines for littering, dog fouling and antisocial behaviour, but with more discretion than before. And the money from those fines will go back into the services rather than lining the pockets of a private company. Madam Mayor, we said we would introduce more police officers in New Addington and Fieldway, and I'm pleased that those officers will be starting work in the next few weeks. We said we would tackle domestic abuse and sexual violence, and we have put more money into those services and increased the number of IDVAs, both in the hospital and in the police station. Madam Mayor, we have signed up to the White Ribbon campaign to tackle violence against women, and we've launched a campaign to change attitudes on domestic abuse, sexual violence and female genital mutilation. And we are pushing the debate nationally by launching a petition calling for a register of domestic violence perpetrators. Madam Mayor, we said we'd be more transparent and engage with residents more, and I'm pleased that we've introduced webcasting of our council meetings, and that we've made it easier for our residents to petition for a debate in this chamber, which has already been successfully used. Madam Mayor, we've introduced the Your Croydon weekly newsletter that goes to 40,000 residents, and we've made the Croydon app better, making it easier to report issues to us. And we've relaunched the Croydon website and provided a more joined-up service to the My Account service, with nearly 70,000 people using that service. Madam Mayor, we said we would support the voluntary sector, and I'm pleased that we have protected voluntary sector funding and increased the amount of money available to the Active Communities Fund. We've strengthened the local strategic partnership and introduced a stronger communities board. We are developing a gold standard equality policy and tackling financial exclusion and financial exclusion. We will work with the credit union to get people out of the hands of payday lenders and give them the help and support they need to budget properly, especially as we're going through the welfare reform programme. Madam Mayor, we have launched the Opportunity and Fairness Commission, and I commend this budget to us. It protects frontline services, it freezes council tax, and it makes Croydon a fairer, more just and socially just place to live and work. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Maria Coutura to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After 17 speeches this evening, we're probably well aware this is a council tax meeting, and therefore we're here to discuss the way the Labour administration are spending our residents' council tax. As local politicians, we're constantly and rightly under the scrutiny for choice we make when it comes to spending the money we take from our local people. The projected surplus in the general budget, according to your document, is £6 million. But what are Labour choosing to spend that money on? Well, they started by spending a few thousand removing some bricks from Central Parade into Addington. They're spending at least £200,000 on a Fairness Commission. They're spending over £150,000 on an ambitious festival. I'm sure these are all essential spending commitments, Madam Mayor. The expression bread and circuses springs to mind, Madam Mayor. All the while, the poorest in our borough are still struggling to make ends meet. But the Labour administration could be doing something about this. But they're not. They're adding to them. Last year, we gave a rent holiday to our council tenants, and Councillor Butler, in the papers last week, called it a gimmick, and instead has chosen to increase the rents by 2.2%. But as if that were bad enough, Labour are also choosing to increase rents for garages and parking spaces. Bulk refuse collection charges are increasing, likely leading to increasing in fly tipping. This is made worse by groundskeeping and caretaking costs also going up. And that's all before the pernicious tenant tax comes in whatever form. The houses of our most vulnerable residents are being targeted by this Labour administration, and they should hang their heads in shame, Madam Mayor. We have no detail in this budget about Labour's ongoing costs either. They flip-flopped under public pressure to keep Hurley Pool open, but there's no guarantee of funding next year. They've committed £500,000 to Ashburton Library, with no detail about the long-term cost implications of running that facility. Time after time, Labour are demonstrating breathtaking financial incompetence with the money of our residents. Nationally, Labour have pledged to take away the new homes bonus. That's about £12 million minimum gone every year from Croydon's bottom line. If this goes ahead, Councillor Godfrey won't be able to put on his glitzy festivals unless Councillor Butler continues to put up her council rents. How will Councillor Newman fund his political propaganda posters? He'll probably have to have a word in Councillor Collins' ear to put up the cost of waste collection again and get our taxpayers to continue to pay more for their replacement recycling bins. Madam Mayor, I really do despair. This is a council that says it's for the benefit of the people of Croydon. It's really not. The sad truth is, Madam Mayor, Labour are incompetent nationally and they're incompetent locally. This is a sham of a budget. This is not fair to our residents. This is not transparent. This is not open. And I therefore oppose the budget.
I call on Councillor Stuart Collins to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, as a Deputy Leader of this Council, I'm proud to support this positive budget. I'm proud to be part of a talented Cabinet team promoting so many positive initiatives. And I'm proud that Croydon is now a can-do borough. A borough that can freeze the council tax, a council that can keep a manifesto promise, a borough that leading the fight against domestic violence, a council that can hold a summer festival, a can-do council putting affordable housing first, a council that can have play streets, safer 20-mile-an-hour zones, a council that can run a campaign for cleaner streets. It's good to say this budget allows us to reorganise our landfill recycling collections into a village-style system, a system that will improve the service to our residents. It's good to be able to say we'll replace the recycling boxes with green wheelie bins, and to say that this will lead to a weekly landfill collections where they are needed most. It's good to say we're a more open and accountable council. Our meetings are on the web, and there are now less papers in Part B. It's right for us to insist on the South London Waste Partnership that they follow our lead, that it signs up to more public debate on important issues like air quality, incineration and shared services. Here we have a positive budget from a positive council that never give up until our ambitions are achieved. The reasons we won last year were we were positive. We listened to public feedback, and this will continue. Telling the public what you imagine your opposition will do is negative. Of course, we were never going to put the council up 27%. Fisher's Farm is a fine example of this, Mario. The centre is a good example. We all need affordable housing, so the land was raised as a possibility for housing with a local community. It's common sense the council shouldn't leave a community without a large area that large without a recycling centre, but out goes a leaflet saying save Fisher's Farm. Negative, untruthful and worrying to residents. I have a challenge for all of us, and that is to allow our council to put out ideas for debate amongst our communities without jumping to partisan conclusions. We need to create the freedom for our council officers to think out of the box, to allow councillors to discuss possibilities with their community without fear of opponents claiming it's a done deal. I challenge some of you in the local press tonight as well to be more positive about Croydon. It's pointless giving the impression you can't cross a road without being run over, or you can't walk the streets without fear, or you can't trust a single politician in our town. There'll always be bad examples, but there'll always be far more good examples. We should all want to create a buzz about Croydon. So much is in this town's favour, with Westfield and Hammerson's creating jobs. We need a positive vibe. We need to bring in more investors. In the film Kelly's Heroes, remember Donald Sutherland's lines? Why don't you knock off with those negative waves? Why don't you dig how beautiful it is out there? And with so many positive waves we can't lose. Well, they got positive and they got the gold. Let us all be Croydon's heroes. Let us make with the positive waves. Let's get the gold for Croydon. Support this budget, a budget for a positive future, a can-do budget for a can-do Croydon.
I call on Councillor Sarah Bashford to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've read the budget with interest, and we all have to remember is that the options are put forward are Labour's choices. We know that any administration would have to make cuts, but on what and by how much is the choice of the administration in control. So whilst we hear those opposite bemoaning the reduction in funding from central government, always remember that what is in this document is their choice. This is the first time they've presented a budget in over 8 years, and therefore it shows what they think is important and what isn't, what areas they're going to spend money in and the ones they won't. In their manifesto and in this chamber, they made some promises, and let's see if they've come to fruition. Firstly, they campaigned not to have a waste-to-energy plant or an incinerator built in Sutton. And they also wanted to leave the waste partnership. But now the Cabinet member says he won't change anything as it's too expensive. The costs haven't changed, just their view. Secondly, they were going to move all staff out of Bernard Weatherall House. Now the Cabinet member for Finance says it's a fantastic building. Thirdly, they were going to rescind the library contract and bring the service back in-house. Well, as we know, this hasn't happened, and they've just ploughed more money into one library in the north of the borough. We do know they can make decisions, but we also know that they change them. We just have to look at the school playing field fiasco, which they said was officer error. We are pleased that they have reversed the decision to close Purley Pool, but we don't see any money in the budget for it. And now they've had to remove political posters during a politically restricted period, which again they say were decided on by officers without their sign-off. I wonder who's actually running this council. It's also worth pointing out that whilst this budget cuts jobs, Councillor Newman is increasing his office staff by 2, even though he says all the budget decisions are for the people of Croydon, not politicians. I'm not sure how, although he has tried, how he can justify an increase in backroom staff for his benefit when frontline services are being cut. Personally, I'd rather see additional staff in the contact centre dealing with residents' concerns and questions, rather than cutting the hours they'll be available. But if he thinks his demands are more important, so be it, that he can make that decision. As I said, Madam Mayor, this budget is about choices, about Labour's choices, and it's clear to see what Councillor Newman and his cronies think is more important. I oppose this budget.
I now call Councillor Tony Newman to exercise the right to reply and conclude
Madam
the
Mayor,
debate.
I'm delighted to say that one of my excellent deputy leaders, Councillor Butler, will be doing that role for me tonight.
Councillor Alison Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we've heard it all tonight from the opposition. Under this budget, Labour is delivering 10 million on new council homes, affordable housing targets, regeneration of our estates, the lowest rent rises in London, continued investment in decent homes, commitment to improving standards in the private rented sector, a new approach to homelessness, working with our housing association partners to ensure that Croydon is their borough of choice, an Article 4 direction to stop poor quality housing in the town centre, 9,500 housing starts, looking at our local plan so that the whole borough benefits by it, district regeneration for New Addington, Purley, South Norwood and Thornton Heath, and that's just a start. We delivered the Croydon asked, finally getting both the Mayor of London and central government to sit up and listen to Croydon. And our growth plan is all about delivery. And why are these measures so important to Croydon? Because, as my colleagues have said, some of the people in our borough have got the lowest living standards they've had for a long, long time, and too many of our people are without homes. And so I dismiss the hypocrisy from you and your government, Dudley, when you talk about housing, because your government drastically reduced funding to housing associations and has overseen a dramatic reduction in available affordable housing. You introduced the bedroom tax. You introduced the benefits cap with no allowance for London rents, effectively saying, sorry, you are too poor to live in Croydon, to some of our people. You allowed developers to take the lead when it came to affordable homes. You introduced permitted development, saying not only do you not have to provide affordable housing, you do not have to invest in local communities, and you don't even have to meet space standards. And if that was not enough, your government then dreamed up the vacant building credit, removing an important element of developer contribution to the provision of affordable housing and losing much more needed office space. This one was so bonkers that even the Westminster Council's injecting to it. And you would think that you would stop there, seeing people's desperate needs for homes. But no, we are facing a government who will not stop. So Ian Duncan-Smith now proposes that if we have any council houses left, we should give them away. After all, what does it matter to him where the next generation comes from? And that's great to give homes away, but if you do not invest in new affordable housing, then you leave people homeless, you leave people on the street, and you leave people desperate. Councillor Margaret Limmead, who outsourced the care workers, resulting in a drastic cut in their wages for care workers and a poorer service for the people of this borough. Councillor Dudley Mead, I didn't criticise you for following government guidelines. I criticised you for putting up the rent by 4.8% last year when other councils weren't going that high. And the nonsense you talk about now, I was going to give everybody 2 weeks off. Well, you're such a great accountant. It wasn't in your budget, and it wasn't in the HRA 30-year plan. So where did that come from? But this Labour administration is interested in investing in those who have no homes. So we're clearing up the mess of your government and providing a better service for the people of Croydon. Because this is a budget that's delivering on Fairfield Halls and not just talking about it. Barwell's boy Mario, he dismisses the cultural needs of our borough and the wishes of the people of New Addington, but then that's what you'd expect. Yes, our budget is about choices, both to Councillor Bashford and to Councillor Pollard. And you admit that we have to cut £100 million of services, and that's what you had to do. But you make no allowance that the next 100 million on top of the last 100 million. And you may have found it easy to top slice our services and outsource our services without thought, but we're really looking at the people of the Croydon and what matters. So your absolute failure to build council houses. Dudley Mead, you yourself have called for an inquiry into a system that you put in place. The failure to deliver those council houses. No, we haven't. We have invested. We have had to pick up your mess. Your mess. Councillor Cummings, your bid for the leadership of the opposition is noted by both sides. Councillor Hockley, who chose to invest in the tobacco industry instead of homes. Disgraceful. I could go on, but Madam Mayor, thank you.
That concludes the council tax debate. I am now putting the recommendations as contained in the Cabinet Business Report relating to General Fund and HRA Budget 2015-16 and Financial Strategy 2015-19, Treasury Management Strategy Statement, Minimum Revenue Provision Policy Statement and Annual Investment Strategy 2015-16 for approval by the Council. There is a legal requirement that this decision is taken by way of a poll vote. The Chief Executive will explain the procedures. Chief Executive.
Each member's name will be called in alphabetical order. Please respond by saying either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Ali.
Yes.
Councillor Aldsley.
Yes.
Councillor Avis.
Yes.
Councillor Baines.
No.
Councillor Bashford.
No.
Councillor B. Councillor Ben.
Yes.
Councillor Bennett.
No.
Councillor Bird.
No.
Councillor Bonner.
Yes.
Councillor Brew.
No.
Councillor Butler.
Yes.
Councillor Buttinger.
No.
Councillor Canning. Councillor Chatterjee. No. Councillor Chowdhury.
Yes.
Councillor Clancy.
No.
Councillor Clowder.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
Yes.
Councillor Cratura.
No.
Councillor Cummings.
No.
Councillor Fisher.
No.
Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yes.
Councillor Fleming. Yes. Councillor Gatland. No. Councillor Godfrey. Yes. Councillor Hale. No. Councillor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Hay-Justice.
Yes.
Councillor Henson.
Yes.
Councillor Hollands.
No.
Councillor Hopley.
No.
Councillor Jewett. Councillor Kabir.
Yes.
Councillor Bernadette Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Shafi Khan.
Yes.
Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Karamaya.
Yes.
Councillor Lawler.
Yes.
Councillor Letts.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Mann.
Yes.
Councillor Mansell.
Yes.
Councillor Margaret Mead. Councillor Dudley Mead. Councillor Mohan. Councillor Neal. Councillor Newman. Councillor O'Connell. He's left. Okay. Councillor Pellin. Councillor Perry. Councillor Helen Pollard. Councillor Tim Pollard. Councillor Prince.
Yes.
Councillor Kadir. Councillor Rendell. Councillor Ryan. Councillor Scott. Councillor Selva. Councillor Speakman. Councillor Strannock. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Watson. Councillor Winborn. Councillor Woodley.
Yes.
Councillor Wright. Councillor Shahu Hamid.
Yes.
I have the results. There are no abstention, and 38 voted yes and 29 voted no. The ayes have it. Agenda item 7, to receive the business report of the Cabinet and Councillors' written questions to Cabinet members. Chief Executive.
Members are reminded that this report contains the Cabinet business relating to the Council tax and budget setting reports of the Cabinet meeting held on the 17th of February 2015. Other business transacted at that meeting will be dealt with at the next ordinary Council meeting. Members are advised, whilst there is no time limit for this item, there is a guillotine of 9:35 p.m. for the end of this meeting. Councillors may ask no more than 2 questions on each item of business contained in the business report, and may also ask 2 supplementary questions arising from the reply given to a written question they have submitted. Up to 20 minutes may be spent on the questions to the Leader, which will include 4 minutes for any announcements, and up to 10 minutes to each Cabinet member, which will include up to 2 minutes for announcements. Any part of the report which has not been reached by the end of the meeting will be taken as read. Each Cabinet member may use their allocation of 2 minutes for announcements, even if there is no time for further questions before the end of the meeting. Any part of the report that has not been reached by the end of the time allocated will be taken as read and moved en bloc to be noted. Recommendations contained in the Cabinet report were debated under agenda item 8.
Councillor Newman, do you move the business report?
Happy to move the business report, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Butler, will you second moving of the business report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Newman, do you have anything to add? You have no more than 4 minutes.
Just a very short opportunity, if I may, to make a very short statement. Madam Mayor, we've seen an appalling incident, I think, in Croydon this afternoon with the defacing of the public art that was so much admired and reported on just in the last week or two. Myself, Councillor Godfrey and others are working on this. We will use CCTV and every other means at our every tool, if you like, to try and find the perpetrators of this. But far more importantly, I think we need to look at, as Council, about how we might, even if it meant introducing a bylaw perhaps, we might look at how we protect areas where we want to see public art in this town in the future. I would hope and understand I would have the support of both sides of the chamber in that. But this is very much about culture and art in this town, and it's very much about not allowing those who are so minded to deface the art and culture in this town. Thank you.
Are there any questions to the lead?
Madam Mayor, can I just say that on this side we would welcome such a move?
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Are there any questions to the Leader? Councillor Stranek.
Thank you for your response to my question CQ 12115. Can I just be clear? The Council are spending $165,000 to open the community centre on Monks Hill by the end of April 2015. Quest Academy would have opened it in October 2014 at no cost to the Council taxpayer. What advice do you have for the pensioners who are still sitting in a cold church hall and will be till the end of April?
Councillor Newman. Councillor Newman. Members of the Council, this is not a public meeting. It's not a Council meeting. Can you let Councillors respond? Councillor Newman.
Well, it's a very serious issue, and I think we, as I said before, need to look at it. But it is surely absolutely incomprehensible that whilst these administrative issues are not sorted out, that the heating cannot be turned on. I find that quite stunning. But clearly, Councillor Stranack, you know, if need be, I'll go down to the site with Councillor Godfrey, myself and you, and we'll find we'll do 2 things. We'll find out if we can overcome the remaining weeks of delay, and secondly, we'll find the on switch for the heating.
Councillor Stranack.
Can I just come back? the floodlighting at the centre is on every night. Surely this is typical of actually this Labour Council's budget. It's spending money it doesn't need to spend. The Quest Academy will run this for the community for nothing. You're spending £165,000. At the same time, our most vulnerable children, your looked after children budget over the next 5 years is 3 years is going to be slashed by £5 million. Are you reminded of your colleagues in Rotherham who spent money on needless projects and didn't look after vulnerable children? I would like to remind you about that. Thank you.
Disgusting.
Member of the public.
Madam Mayor, I find that one of the most disgusting, disgraceful contributions that I've ever heard in this council chamber. And if it wasn't for the fact you were so new, and I'll cut you some slack, I'd follow that up, because I think there are appalling comments there, derogatory of members and officers of both sides of this council. I know you were hauled over the coals by members of your own side for your strange contribution to the previous council meeting, but really, Councillor Stranack, we need a more mature debate than throwing that sort of innuendo and smear around this council chamber, and I think you should leave it there.
Councillor Pollard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given that you subsequently took them down, do you accept that it was wrong to cite posters making a blatantly party political point using taxpayers' money when you did so recently?
Newman.
Actually, it's funny when you look back, actually, in history. I don't know if anyone remembers these posters. £40 million, it said, right to the government. The government of the day, for the public record, was a Labour government. It said he's gone now, but Councillor Fisher urged the population of Croydon to write to the Labour government to talk about the funding for Croydon. It is absolutely... incredible to me that what we've actually, and that's the point I was coming on to, it's absolutely incredible to me that when we offered you...
Councillor Newman.
Madam Mayor, I'll sit...
Councillor Newman. Councillor Jewett, can you please sit down? Can you please sit down? Members of the public, if you're not quiet, I have to ask you to be removed. Thank you. Councillor Newman, can you please continue?
Madam Mayor, I think that was the point. Councillor Pollard rather hit the nail on the head. That was the fair funding campaign of the day. You can go back actually over several generations and make a case for fairer funding for Croydon. But actually, when we were in opposition, we were actually supportive of actually making the case to government, be it our government of the day, to say there should be fairer funding for Croydon. What I find amazing now is that you've broken that cross-party consensus. Those posters don't say. I find it strange, but I think Sarah will be incredibly heartened to hear that you assume that anyone who sees those posters thinks, I know what I'll do, I'll go and vote Labour. Well, perhaps they will all go and vote Labour when they see those posters, but it doesn't mention the word Conservative or Labour. What it's actually about is saying central government has launched an unprecedented attack on local government, and that Croydon has been in the eye of that storm. The fact that your previous leadership neglected its duty to fight the case for Croydon, it's been left to me as the Labour leader. It's been left to me as the Labour leader of Croydon to go and have the meetings with Boris Johnson and others to make the case for Croydon. But what I find stunning is that you've walked away from making the case for funding for this borough. You've actually support an MP, a Member of Parliament, whose office staff sit over there in front of me, who, as I said in my speech earlier, spends his day job whipping other Tory MPs, even those with grave doubts about what they're doing.
Madam Mayor, can I have a point of personal explanation, please?
Through the lobbies.
Point of personal explanation. Yeah,
through the lobbies to support
He's referred to me. He's referred to us. He's referred to me.
Yeah, look, I'm sure Councillor Mario Criatura will have time.
Can I have a point of personal explanation as he's named me, please, Madam Mayor? He's named me. Procedural motion, 1.14.
Name you. You named yourself.
Madam Mayor, I'm sure those that control the Twitter feed of the MP for Croydon Central will readjust the vents in terms of the outcome of this meeting and history as it's actually written, and we'll see that happen later. But the facts are that you lot have broken the cross-party consensus, and you've backed the cuts to this town that Gavin Barwell's driven through Parliament. You should hold your heads in shame.
Councillor Kratura, I understand you want to say something?
I do, yeah. You're standing there, making these allegations about someone who's not here to defend themselves. You're making claims that are factually inaccurate. You're making claims that, with the budget chart that was voted for you by your leaders, agreed to £30 billion worth of government spending cuts. This poster isn't accurate. It is in the politically restricted period, and it should not be used again, either in leaflet form or in poster form. Thank you very much.
Councillor Newman.
Madam Mayor, I mean, it's quite extraordinary that I'm actually stunned that you would want to come here and defend a line that says that this council should not be, on behalf of the people of Croydon, fighting for every penny, for every pound we can get from Croydon, from the government. As I've said, we did it when it was a Labour government because we believed it was the right thing to do. You have rolled over and allowed the current government to trample over the budget of this town. Shameful.
Councillor Pollard.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. The poster that you so proudly showed earlier, of course, is somewhat different from the poster you have just recently displayed, in that it looks at the funding formula, which I think everyone involved accepts has not changed in many decades, and is not fair to various parts of the borough. And I think everyone would agree that we should encourage any future government to look at that formula and make sure that it is changed in a way that reflects modern demography and where need now is, as opposed to where need was many decades ago. Not least, we should start with the Barnett formula that looks at the allocation of funds between England and Scotland. And we should look at how that trickles down in every possible permutation. So our poster was somewhat different. Our poster was not attacking current government policy. Your poster is. But of course, in true Councillor Newman fashion, first of all, he didn't like it when Councillor Couture attempted to make a point-of-person explanation during his answer. Councillor Newman, you might like to chew on the fact that you routinely do this in every single meeting. You always interrupt people from this side when they're speaking. Our side, by and large, do not. That is only the second time in 12 years I can recall someone from our side doing that. And the only reason we do it is because you routinely use that as a means of disrupting other people's speeches, which is exceedingly rude and bad-mannered. Going back to the question I originally asked, of course, again, in true Councillor Newman fashion, he hasn't answered the question at all. I asked him a very simple question. I asked him a very simple question, which actually only requires a yes or no, which is that, was it wrong to cite those posters? And we presume that you must have concluded that it probably was, because you ordered them to be taken down. Simple question, yes or no, was it wrong?
Councillor.
As you know well, for reasons we all know, there's a by-election in Selhurst, and the council then has to operate under different rules. But if you actually, if I just read this out, if you think it's unfair, then why not help your new council do something about it? Join our campaign for a fair deal for Croydon. Let's lobby together to end this financial injustice. I supported that, I repeat at the time. I find it staggering. We've heard colleagues opposite, one or two actually, those that did a focus on the budget tonight, make reference to the funding for this borough. I think the one thing, or I thought the one thing, as I came into this chamber tonight, we could all agree on, that we wanted to see more funding for Croydon. Instead of that, we have a Member of Parliament not only voting for cuts, but then wanting to close down the debate about the level of cuts from the Conservative government, and then the icing on the cake, and I repeat it, a member of his staff then decides he'll rewrite history and change the Wikipedia page. You couldn't make it up. It's like an episode of Yes Minister.
Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to ask a question, but there seems little point in the chamber this evening. It's not going to be answered, and we're not going to do it from an equal footing.
Councillor Bashford.
I'd actually concur with my colleague, Councillor Cummings. This meeting has been very unfair between the way you have treated us, Madam Mayor, and the way you've treated the other side. And I feel it's important that that has to be mentioned. I do have a question, and I have a very straightforward, factual question for Councillor Newman.
Do you have a question to ask?
I've just said I have a factual question to ask Councillor Newman. I'd therefore like it if he could answer the question rather than faff around with all sorts of other things. And the question I have is, you say to everyone, you are open, you're honest, you're transparent. Therefore, why, in your budget book on page 36, do you use an acronym with no explanation? None whatsoever. The acronym is REFCUS, R-E-F-C-U-S. Can you please tell us what that stands for so members of the public are aware and what it actually means in real terms? Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Well, I think, notwithstanding the disgraceful attack on yourself there, Madam Mayor, but I do think the fact that actually this meeting is being broadcast on webcast is a very clear statement of how transparent this council is. If there are acronyms in there that should have an explanation, then actually that shouldn't be the case. But we've just doesn't it rather sum up the effort from the opposition tonight? A multi-£100 million budget, service priorities for this town, folk in need, and the only thing we've got is Councillor Cummins raising the white flag of surrender and Councillor Bashford criticising officers for leaving an acronym in the budget book. If they have, Madam Mayor, if they have, I apologise, but I think perhaps for the benefit of your side, Councillor Cummins was actually on to something. I think you've lost the first 10 rounds. Why not quit and go home now before it gets any worse?
Councillor Bashford.
Unfortunately, Councillor Newman, you've gone back to your old style of just being rude and evasive and not answering the question. So, you have said that this is being webcast for transparency. I have asked a question which you clearly don't know the answer to, so wouldn't it have been fairer to our residents who are watching this to just say, I don't know, I'll come back and let you know? That would have been the sensible answer, but no, you had to go on, do a little diatribe and be rude, which is actually all we ever get from you, as well as it's the officers' fault. Where have we heard that before, I wonder?
Councillor Newman.
Madam Mayor, I think actually, one of the advantages of the webcast is we had to see, but I think I said before I sat down was that if that was the case as you stated, then I would apologise and we will get it looked at. But the point I was making, if that's all you can come up with on the night that we take through a momentous budget like this, then it's very difficult. But really, Sarah, I think my mum, who's probably watching this, would be affronted to hear you describe me in such terms.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We all know that the Tory MP for Croydon Central has no idea, and I think we've seen tonight that the Tory opposition in the chamber are clueless too. Their horrific legacy, sky-high council tax, persecution of the most vulnerable in the borough, and a leader secretly pocketing thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money. I want to ask the leader, aren't Croydonians better off with a council tax freezing Labour administration, and won't they be better off still with 3 Labour MPs and a Labour government in May?
Councillor Newman.
Well, Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Oliver Lewis, who I pay tribute to for the fantastic campaigning work he's doing in New Addington and Fieldway, along with colleagues, to deliver the new police, to campaign for the new sports centre, to get not a few stones, as somebody over there said, but to get those boulders removed and put pedestrians and elderly people first, to see the investment in the shops and the retail in New Addington. I think Councillor Oliver Lewis and others should be congratulated for that. But I do think, perhaps with his remarks there at the end, perhaps we're actually on to something, because I don't make any apologies either for listening, actually, and taking a different view on Purley Pool. That's a different way of trying to do politics. You can't win sometimes. You change your mind and it's a U-turn and Councillor Pollard shouting at me. But actually, I think it's a much healthier debate about the future of Purley Pool to have it with the pool open rather than shut, and I'm glad that's where we've now got to. But what Councillor Oliver Lewis actually said there at the end was, he said 3 MPs in Croydon for Labour, and why not? Because frankly, after the shambles we've seen earlier this evening, why shouldn't the people of Purley have Labour representation and a decent MP in Parliament as well?
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Page 114 of the report. Can Councillor Newman confirm that people in Selsdon will be paying more council tax in the next financial year than they are in this financial year?
Councillor Newman.
No, the people of Selsdon are having their bills frozen by this Labour Council, and the other thing this Council's doing, we're cutting out the gimmicks. I mean, the hypocrisy over the publicity is stunning. You couldn't move around Croydon last year for a sort of a spiv-like culture of, you know, vote Tory and get 25 quid off your council tax. Councillor Thomas, people saw through you last year. They rejected that kind of politics. They rejected that kind of campaigning, and they voted Labour.
That is not true. We did not say £25 vote Conservative.
Councillor Speaker, can you sit down?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can you sit down?
As we saw there, he didn't even answer the question, Madam Mayor. I just asked him, would they be paying more money next year? And the answer is, yes, they will. I didn't ask him for all the nonsense he came out with. Now, perhaps moving on to another question, can Councillor Newman assure us tonight that no illegal leaflets similar to his poster campaign will be going out with council tax bills during this election Purdue campaign for the Selhurst by-election?
Councillor Newman.
I can absolutely assure you, but then this council doesn't put out illegal leaflets, as you know, Councillor Thomas. But this council will be writing to every resident of the borough to set out the budget priorities that we've voted for tonight, and I think the residents of Croydon will note that the party opposite voted against their council tax being frozen.
I am now moving on to questions on matters relating to the Cabinet Member for Finance and Treasury, Councillor Simon Hall. Do you have anything to add? You have no more than 2 minutes.
Nothing to add, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cummings, do you have Councillor Sean?
Madam Mayor, thank you. I mean, obviously, Councillor Cummings has given up on tonight. CQ 18615. Would like a response from the Cabinet Member to this shocking figure that we pay out £125 million a year to private landlords. This massive subsidy in the housing market is distorting house prices and rents. Would you agree with me that it wouldn't be better to put a decent proportion of this into house building so that we can build affordable homes both to buy and to rent?
Councillor Hall.
Madam Mayor, I would agree that we need to see a situation where rather than £125 million going to private landlords, that we get a way of having that funded for councils to, for example, either on their own or working with RSL and partners to deliver more affordable housing. I'm very pleased that in the budget that we voted through earlier that there is a considerable increase in the amount of spend on council housing compared to what had been budgeted by the previous administration year on year, and that we're working on a series of regeneration projects and increasing the affordable housing rate, which will start to increase that supply. But yes, there needs to be a lot more done, and hopefully with the Labour government we'll see some creative thinking about how that can be done.
Councillor Sean, would you like to come in, or Councillor Canning, Robert Canning?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Hall for his answer to CQ 17715 and also say how pleased modern households will be that their council tax is being frozen in the coming financial year, as set out in our manifesto. The answer mentions the welfare rights team, and they did an absolutely fantastic job visiting a constituent of mine before Christmas and getting the forms filled in for council tax support, and my constituent is now in receipt of that. But as we move forward and we likely make greater use of digital and online services, can Councillor Hall assure me that we won't neglect the more traditional ways of accessing council tax support?
Councillor Hall.
As part of digital enabling, we've got to look at each service to see how much can be brought online, but what the protections are, what the support can be, in particular for vulnerable people. But as was pointed out in the Cabinet paper where this project and this programme was outlined, actually, if we can help people get online or have those that are supporting them and community groups that are supporting them online, not only do we help to make sure that they can put in their claims for council tax support and get what they deserve in terms of that and other welfare benefits, but we actually open them up to get cheaper utilities, cheaper insurance and all sorts of other benefits. And I think that's absolutely vital. But what I do agree with you, because I've had a lot of constituents who've benefited from that team, that the welfare benefits team that we've got and the people that work in that do an absolutely extraordinary job. And I think the way that we're reorganising the people department as part of going forward will help to make sure that the joined-up services and help at the first stage of contact with the council across the board is given.
Councillor Maggie Mansell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I refer to CQ 172-15, which clearly demonstrates that under the last Labour government, we were getting small increases in the rate support grant, and from 2010 onwards, under the Conservative government, we have had massive cuts in the rate support grant. Councillor Hall, do you think that this is fiscally responsible, since the council response to this was to outsource a lot of services, including care services, dedicated staff being put on low minimum wages, 0 hours contracts, so that they had to claim benefits? The Tory government, the Tory council, working together to increase the benefits bill. Is that fiscally responsible?
Councillor Hall.
Well, the first thing to say in this answer is that this is the tip of the iceberg, because it's one particular element of the funding, and actually overall, of course, the funding from central government has been way more, the cuts from central government is way more than this, as has been detailed elsewhere. Where I do agree is that everyone should be have a decent standard of living without gratuitous recourse, shall we say, to benefits. What I mean by that is putting people on minimum wages so they have to be topped up by the state, by various forms of benefit, is not a sensible scheme, and that's exactly why we have started the process of ensuring that everyone that works for the council already, and in due course all our suppliers where services do continue to be outsourced, are paid the London living wage so that we can break this cycle.
Councillor Mansell, do you have any supplementary?
No, I'm very satisfied with that answer. I think it
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, Councillor Maria Coutura.
Thank you for the answer to question CQ 16115 about the amount of borrowing set out in the capital programme for the next 3 years. You've complained in the past, Councillor Hall, about how much the previous administration was borrowing, but you now admit you're borrowing even more. Would you like to correct earlier statements?
The issue about borrowing is whether it's borrowing for vanity projects like £140 million on an HQ building, or for a purpose like school places, like regeneration, like Ashburton Park. So, no, I don't change those answers, because I am proud of the way we are spending this money and the purpose for which the borrowing is being made. And if I may, Madam Mayor, with your indulgence, because I forgot to do it in announcements, just to clear up the acronym that's in the budget papers, which, by the way, was in last year's, and I had to ask officers about it myself because it was in there with no explanation. It's revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute and corrected in the capital area adjustment. I accept that it is an acronym and that we should minimise the number of undefined acronyms. Maybe we'll need a glossary for the budget papers, because actually there are a lot of other ones, but we happen to be all in this chamber familiar with them. So it is something that's appeared in previous years without any explanation. As I say, I can remember having to ask officers for explanations in previous years, but I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Supplementary.
Thank you. Very, very quickly, Councillor, thank you for your answer. It's good to know you're not revising your earlier statements. You're going to have to cut a lot more money as a result of your borrowing. Can you tell me what your priorities for cutting, rather than increasing borrowing and spending, will be for the next year?
Councillor Hall.
I think the best cut we can do is get Gavin Barwell, replace Sarah Jones, replaced by somebody who will actually advocate for this town, for his constituents, rather than seeing this hammering of a local authority providing credible service. What the three-year budget report, budget papers show is that our focus, more seriously, is that our focus is on protecting the front line, of dealing with doing business a different way, including on investments, showing how we can work with partners to bring in other investments and other income for this town and for this council. So actually, again, what we're doing is investing in the future of the town, but the biggest thing to fix it is to get rid of Gavin Barwell and have Sarah Jones as the MP for Croydon Central.
Councillor Lynn Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The capital programme shows that £233,000 has been allocated for measures to mitigate travellers in parks and open spaces. Can you tell me what measures are under consideration and what percentage of the new admin priorities reserve this represents?
Councillor Hall.
In terms of the detailed measures, I'd have to defer to the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Clean and Green. But in terms of use of new administration priorities, this is part of the capital programme, so it does not form any part of the new administration priorities reserve usage.
Councillor Hale.
But that's what it says it is. It says it's funded through the new admin priorities reserve on the table 6.
Councillor Hall.
I thought you were talking about the capital element that we've put in, as opposed to the revenue element. Apologies for that confusion. The revenue element has gone through that, but the capital element is part of the overall capital programme of the Council.
As the budget debate was extended, I am advised that it has been agreed all questions have now been taken. Do any Cabinet members have any announcements to make? If not, this item is now received. We are now moving on to Agenda Item 6. Agenda Item 6, 2016-17 Admission Arrangements for Community and Voluntary Controlled Schools. Councillor Fleming, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, Madam Mayor.
Does the Council agree the recommendations? Please say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Thank you, members. That concludes this meeting of the Council.